Hello and welcome to this tutorial where we will introduce the Jonel's Archer batch system. Archer is a comprehensive batching application that can help you operate your plant accurately and more consistently. Today, we will introduce the following topics on how to navigate the Archer application, which will include the following. Overview the load setup screen, review basic configuration settings including system parameters, load edit options, and setting up new materials. We will cover how to set up products and also introduce the plant monitor. Ready to get started? Let's go ahead and begin with our discussion on the load detail screen. So when you first log into Archer system, there will be two windows that launch. The primary window we are going to be focusing on is the Archer main application window. The second window is the plant monitor. We will discuss more on the plant monitor later in the tutorial. For now, let's focus on the main application window where you will see the load setup pages as I'm showing here. Along the top of this window, you also have some other tabs: products, inventory, trucks, and configuration. We're going to cover several of these tabs during this tutorial. The main load setup page is where you will spend most of your time initiating batches and reviewing loads that are either entered manually or sent over from dispatch. The left pane of the screen is designated for current loads or loads that are queued up to be batched. Above this pane, there are a few buttons you'll want to familiarize yourself with. The Add Edit button is where I can add new loads to the batch system or edit existing ones. The Split Materials option is used to adjust or add split definitions for batch materials that come from different sources like water. We'll talk more on this option later. The Recent Loads provides information on previous loads. You can quickly look up previous batches or reprint QC or ticket printouts. The Next button allows you to hold or pause an existing load or cancel out completely. The Move Up and Down buttons allow you to reprioritize your load queue in case you want to batch out of sequence. The right pane is a load detail pane that shows all the loads that are currently being batched. This includes all material names of the mix design, the target and actual weights of the load. The graph indicates the material's way up trend line. The blue load information header at the top displays the alley or destination, product, load size, truck, ticket number, and job number. The load detail header below the information header will show ticket details that are sent over from dispatch, such as customer name, batch notes, and extra products like fiber or color. These will only display if you're receiving load information from a third-party dispatch system. The batch details that I'm showing here in this example is for a load that has been completed. You can set the system up to always leave the last completed load on the batching window or remove it once the batch is complete. The area down below the load status information on the bottom left side of the window is for batching alert notifications. This area will provide you feedback if there's any issues with the system. If you click on any of the tabs along the top of the menu, you can move to the different batch screens such as products, inventory, and configuration. We will be covering more on those later. Also note that there is a job tab that is available for you to enter ticket and simple jobs in case you're not using a dispatch system. This option can be set up if required, and we will discuss this in another batching tutorial later on. I'm going to select the Edit button now, which will launch the Load Edit window. This window we will use to enter in a new batch manually or edit an existing batch that is sent over from a third-party dispatch system. If you're first getting the system set up, you probably won't have any products entered to the batching system yet, but we'll walk through this window just to give you a general idea of what it will look like. In the product field, I'll get a list of mix designs that are stored in the system. If you know the mix code, you can enter it in the field provided or pick from the list. Next, you can enter in the load size quantity of the batch. This will assume you're entering it in the system default unit of measure, which can be either imperial or metric. If you want to navigate into the Archer windows without using a mouse, you can use the Tab key to move from field to field. If I hit Tab after entering the product code, you'll move to the charge sequence field. If you press it again, you'll move to the ticket number field, and so on. If you want to move back to a different field, use the Shift tab and the cursor will move backward to the preceding field. Optionally, you can specify a truck number, job number, or ticket number. Again, if you're interfaced to a dispatch system, these fields will come over with the delivery ticket. Since I'm running manually, I can either enter these in or leave them blank. The trim area is designated for entering in any quantity in gallons or liters that you want to adjust in the load. This value is typically entered as a negative integer, and it assumes adjustments for a quantity of 1 yard. So if I want to take out 1 gallon of water for each yard of a 9-yard batch, I would enter in a -1 in the trim field. If you want to add water to the load, then you'll want to enter in the integer value as a positive or greater than 0. So in this example, if I want to add a gallon of water, you'll just enter the number 1. Charge sequence refer to the order in which scales are discharged, not the order they fill. Archer is pre-configured with the default charge sequence, but additional sequences can be added in the configuration window. If you want to have more than one charge sequence to choose from, and you want to change the sequence that is defined for the product, you can click on the charging sequence field in the bottom open list box. From the list, click the sequence you want to use. We will cover more on charge sequences in future tutorials. Although the system that I'm batching from currently does not have multiple alleys or loadout points, there are some plants that require multiple destinations at the time of batching. The destination field is only visible on systems configured for multiple loading points, including mixers. To dictate the destination of the current load, click in the destination field or the corresponding button and click on a selection for the drop-down list. If you start a batch without making a selection here, materials will hold their discharge until the destination is selected. The Allow Overlap checkbox provides the means to enable asynchronous reweigh on the next load. This feature allows Archer to start weighing materials for the next load on scales that have emptied during the current load. This feature works for loads that are set up to repeat batch. Any loads on the stack that allow overlap enabled. You can toggle Allow Overlap by checking the checkbox for overlap. Weight Inspect pauses the charging of the scales after each material weighs, giving you the opportunity to analyze the batching process or correct any underweight observations. Weight Inspect can be toggled on or off by clicking the checkbox. This action for Weight Inspect is realized when the batch is started and is best visualized during the batch sequence. The Split Materials field contains a list of materials that can be substituted in whole or in part with their base material counterparts for a load. Controlling reclaimed water is an excellent use of this feature. By configuring reclaimed water as a split material and specifying its specific gravity, you can specify a percentage of the batched water to come from the reclaimed supply. Additionally, Archer will calculate the amount of solids in the reclaimed water and adjust the reclaimed water while adjusting the sand and cement down to compensate for the solids. On the right-hand pane of the load editor, you have the Mix Design Ingredients panel. Here you can view or change the material composition of the mix. You can also add batch products like accelerators and superplasticizers. You can also add non-batch products like fiber, color, and bagged goods to the ingredients list. If you want to adjust the ingredients on the list, you simply click inside one of the rows on the ingredients list. Here I can change the material quantity for the load, per yard or meter. On the far right, you'll see the target quantity value that is calculated for the entire load size. Also notice the adjustment percentage values that are being displayed. This takes into consideration any moisture values that I've entered for this material or automatic readings from moisture probes. If you want to add an additional material or add mix, just click the Add button and then click on the bottom row of the ingredient list. Here I can choose the material I want to add. For example, I'll choose Hirely, and then I can provide how many ounces per hundredweight I want to batch. Then you can select a dose factor, which is a dosing multiple for the given quantity provided. Therefore, if I enter a 1, it will only dose what I've entered in the quantity field. But if I put in a 1.5, it will dose 1.5 the amount. The dosing factor can be set up to reset every batch or remain the same for subsequent batches. You can also use the move up or move down buttons to move a material higher in the batch sequence. When you've made all your load adjustments, just select Stack Batch, and that will save the changes and move you back to the main load window. If you want to go back and make any modifications to the load, you can double click on the left pane, and that will open the load edit screen with the latest changes. If I'm ready to start batching, I'll select Release Load, and the system will either alert me of any issues or start the batch process. So let's drill in a bit and talk about the configuration page in your Archer program. In this tutorial, we'll begin focusing on basic setup configuration pertaining to system information, load edit parameters, and setting up materials. We will cover deeper configure elements like node and link elements, blends, and devices in the advanced configuration tutorial. When you select the configuration page, it will look similar to my screen where you have a bunch of little folders down the left column. On the left is a list of configurable elements or configuration tree, and on the right are the adjustable settings associated with the currently selected option. At the bottom of the window are a blue information bar and a row of buttons. The information bar offers a bit of help on whatever you have selected. Depending on the task, some or all the buttons will be grayed out. If needed, the panes and the columns of the parameter list will be resized by dragging the borders that separate them from side to side. Configuration elements are grouped by type and are denoted with yellow folder icons. Sub-options are also denoted with yellow folder icons. You select a configuration group by clicking on its title in the list. All configuration elements and sub-options must be expanded to gain access to their underlying settings. To expand a configuration element or folder, click on the plus sign next to it or double-click on its title. Expanded items will automatically collapse when another is expanded, but you can purposely collapse an item by clicking on the minus sign or double-clicking on its title. If the contents of any pane exceed the window boundaries, drag the scroll bars or use the scroll wheel on your mouse to navigate through them. Some settings are accessible directly from the primary configuration group folder or subfolder, but most are found at the terminating branches that are denoted with an icon. The first item we'll discuss is how to change system parameters. The parameters pane is subdivided into two columns. The left side shows the parameter type or description and is non-editable, and the right contains the adjustable settings. To change a setting, click on this field. The nature of the setting will determine how you may interact with it. Usually you will enter, edit, and key in the new value. Other times, a button will appear to the right of the setting field and you must click on it to reveal a list box. From the list box, you click on the desired option to make the change. In some cases, clicking the button will open a dialog box in which you interact to make changes. Some settings are used internally by Archer and cannot be changed. These settings are grayed out and are not discussed in this chapter. In all cases, however, the information bar below the settings will reveal the tip on the selected settings and what it does. The first configuration folder in the system info page, you will highlight this page. You have a bunch of different settings in the parameters you can tweak for the Archer system. These are global settings that identify your system, how it affects how Archer communicates with the PLC, and establish basic measure for recipes, water, and load size. Some of these are preset at the factory and should not require change. The plant ID, company name, and weighmaster name are self-explanatory and are reserved for you to identify your system. Default recipe size sets the default to used when creating a new product. This setting can be changed individually for each new product or globally by keying in a different value here. Normally expressed in units of volume, but must be mass or for asphalt systems. You can change the unit of measure by explicitly keying it in. Otherwise, the unit of measure in effect will be appended when you save your changes. The PLC port name is the port that allows Archer to communicate with the PLC. This setting should not be changed without first contacting Jonel customer support. The PLC simulate mode provides 3 options for running Archer. The first is the simulate off, which connects Archer to the PLC so you can operate your plant. The second option is simulate with no PLC. Disconnects Archer from the PLC so you can simulate the plant operation. The third is to simulate with a PLC, which connects Archer to a PLC so you can change, load, and test PLC functionality without operating your plant. The pounds per gallon field is a global definition affecting all water-based calculations made by Archer and should not be changed unless you have a good reason to do so. Print weights when charged may be set to yes or no. When this setting is enabled, a ticket will print after all scales and bottles are charged. Day start time and day end time specifies the beginning and end of a 24-hour period. The values set here dictate when a new day begins and yesterday ends. Changing these values from logical midnight affects all database records that store dates. For example, by shifting the start and end times, all activity that occurs after normal business hours would be recorded as the next day. Enable periodic reconciliation affects interaction on the inventory tab. When set to no, each material has its own reconciliation button. When you set it to yes, the individual buttons are removed from the window and a new reconcile button appears at the top of the pane, which is used to set a period and reconcile all materials. Hotkeys can be controlled by the first interactive load hotkeys, which may be set to yes or no and disabled. When enabled, the key combination, such as Alt F1, can be used to trigger the first inactive load in the stack. If your system is set up for multiple plants, alleys, or mixes, the key combinations Alt F2 and Alt F3 and Alt F4 will also be available to trigger their respective loads. The hotkey start mode allows you to configure which load will start when using the F1 load hotkey. Setting this to start first load will cause the first load in the stack to initiate when the hotkey is used. To cause a selected load in the stack to initiate, set this to start selected load. Enable last load display sets the last batch load to be displayed in gray in the load stack. You can enable this parameter by setting it to yes or disable it by setting it to no. Confirm loads application may be set to yes or no. When set to yes, a confirm dialog will display when you attempt to close the Archer window, preventing you from inadvertently closing Archer. Obviously set to no, the Archer window will close without prompt. Finally, the plant totalizer keeps track of the total load quantity and count from the date specified. You can reset the totalizer by clicking in the edit field and then clicking on the edit button to the right. This action will open the totalizer display, where you can reset it by clicking on the corresponding button. Clicking done will close the totalizer. Print weights on jobs will automatically print batch weights on delivery tickets for new jobs. Show dispatch ID on inventory form will provide description of the material that is set for the dispatch ID as well as the material's name. For show material bin, if it's set to yes, the material and bin identification will be displayed in the plant monitor. The ticket printer configuration provides an editor to configure ticket printers for the Archer system. When you select the button on the far right column, it will display a window that lets you set up the printer name, the printer type, the printer driver, and even the ticket format file, where you can set up different formats for your delivery ticket and where you want the fields to be printed. You can also identify when you want the ticket to print on a start load condition, or when it's stacked, or even when it's first loaded onto the stack. The option for always print weights will do just that. It'll print batch weights on every ticket. If left blank, that flag will come from dispatch on whether a print batch weight requirement situation will occur. Changing to cumulative tolerances rather than each material change can be changed here. You can disable or enable the QC print button in recent load dialog by changing this option. You also have some print conditions that you can adjust for various plant situations. Finally, here is where you can require purchase orders for inbound material receipts in inventory. Refer to your user guide for more information on the rest of these settings and how they can be helped to configure your Archer system. Under the System Tree folder, there's the Load Edit page, where you can set up different behavior for the Load Editor window we covered earlier in the tutorial. Initial water trim value is used by the Load Editor when setting up a new load. This setting you make determines what the default water trim will be when setting up a load. 3 options are provided. First, From Product sets the water trim field for a new load to the value used in a previous load setup with the same product. Remember Last Use sets the water trim field for a new load to the value used in the previous load regardless of product selection. Reset Trim to Default always sets the water trim field to the value of the default water trim without exception. Default water trim value is the value that will be used when the initial water trim value is set to reset water trim to default. Maximum load size defines the largest load your plant and, more importantly, your truck can process. This setting prevents you from inadvertently creating oversized loads. Stack Load on Hold sets all loads added to the stack on hold. Setting this parameter to yes presets the equivalent stack on hold setting in the load editor, which can be toggled off independently in the load editor. Stack load with overlap allows you to preset all loads added to the stack with overlap enabled. This too can be toggled off independently when setting up a load in the load editor. Water trim adds water may be set to yes or no. If this value is set to yes, the water trim value is added to the initial water for all loads. When set to no, the water trim value is subtracted from the initial water. Auto increment ticket number is disabled when set to 0 or left blank. Setting this value to a number greater than 0 enables automatic number incrementing, starting with the entered value. Default truck discharge rate defines the default rate used and displayed on the discharge rate slider in the plant monitor. Accepted values must be between 0 and 200. Show scale load target displays the progress and target for each scale on the monitor pane for the loads window, and when set to no, this information is not displayed. Assure material available for starting load prevents loads from starting until all ingredient sources have enough supply for the load. If set to no, loads will be allowed to start, but ingredients with insufficient supply will hold until the required quantity is available. Required truck assignment prevents loads from starting until a truck number is assigned. Set it to yes to enable or no to disable. The other options here are show load messages on top. If this is set, the load warning or error messages will be shown on the top of the load display rather than at the bottom where they currently are now. The use last load setting, if set, new loads will use the last stacked loads setting rather than default or zero out. Ensure target unit of measure class match if set. An ingredient's target unit of measure class will be coerced to match the measurement's device's unit of measure class. Finally, the dry load code would be set if you want the water trim field on the load editor to cause the load to be run without any water or admixtures. The last page under system locales, the settings here are preset at the factory and not be changed. Okay, well this concludes our first part of this tutorial. Stay tuned to this YouTube channel where we introduce how to set up and configure materials and products as well as go over how to use the plant monitor. Thank you very much and have a great day.